Blackwashing. Just kidding, just kidding. Race swapping, or as the internet's incels love to call it, blackwashing, is a term often used disparagingly to argue why original characters in media and TV should never deviate from their initial iterations. While there are instances of race swapping that can perpetuate harmful stereotypes, tokenize marginalized groups, or feel poorly executed, when done right, it can add depth to storytelling, provide meaningful representation, and introduce audiences to fresh fantasy concepts that broaden their horizons. Season 2 of Castlevania Nocturne surpassed its predecessor in many ways, and I was particularly captivated by Annette's character this season. As a love interest to the main protagonist, Richter, she often manages to outshine him, and I love that. Don't get it twisted though, Richter has his moments this season too, but a significant reason for his standout arc was his growing relationship with Annette and his unwavering drive to protect her. What's great though is that Annette repeatedly proves she doesn't need his protection and she's more than capable of handling herself. So him showing these gestures is just good to see overall in a ship. Annette serves as both Richter's internal and external conflict this season, adding complexity to his journey. In today's video, we're diving into Annette's character from Castlevania Nocturne, discussing how to write black characters in fantasy the right way. Race swapping done right. But before we get into it, hi, I'm Naya. I make media, fictional media, and writing content. If you don't know me and you're just seeing my video for the first time, please subscribe. That is pretty much all I'm asking you to do, and we can be here and talk about a lot of different fun things on this channel. Without any further ado, let's get into this. Annette is a supporting character in the Castlevania series. She is Richter Belmont's girlfriend. She made her debut in 1993 NEC PC Engine CD game Castlevania Rondo of Blood, reprising this role in a few other games such as Castlevania, Dracula X, Castlevania, The Dracula X Chronicles, CR Pachinko Akumajo Dracula, and Castlevania Grimoire of Souls. If I didn't get the Japanese pronunciation right, please do bear with me. In some games, and depending on the actions taken by the player along their journey, she can also be fought as a boss. In Castlevania Rondo of Blood, Count Dracula, resurrected by the Dark Priest Shaft, began his plan for world domination by attacking villages and capturing inhabitants, including Annette, the girlfriend of the vampire hunter Richter Belmont. Learning of her abduction, Richter, armed with the legendary vampire killer whip, set out to rescue her. Despite arriving too late to save his home village of Alijiba, Richter embarked on a perilous journey to Dracula's castle. Along the way, he saved Maria Renard, a young girl and friend of Annette. So this is the storyline according to the games. Annette, chosen by Dracula due to her ties to the Belmont clan, was imprisoned in the castle's clock tower. Dracula attempted to turn her to a vampire, offering her eternal life, but she refused and threatened to take her own life. Richter eventually reached Annette, but after ensuring her safety, he chose to continue his mission to defeat Dracula. Annette reluctantly returned to the village, understanding his destiny. In the Dracula X Chronicles, Annette's backstory was expanded. Dracula intended to exploit her connection to the Belmonts by turning her into a vampire, and Richter had to rescue additional prisoners, Iris and Terra, to save her. In Castlevania Grimoire of Souls, a rewritten grimoire version of Annette appeared. Corrupted by Carmilla's magic, she was turned into a vampire and fought against Richter and Maria. Initially unrecognizable to Richter, Annette later regained her humanity after Carmilla's defeat, expressed remorse for her actions, and wished Richter well in his quest. However, in the Netflix animated series Castlevania Nocturne, Annette is only loosely adapted from her original incarnation. While she retains her name and romantic connection to Richter Belmont, this version of Annette is reimagined as a Caribbean native. Far from being a damsel in distress, she is a skilled swordsman who yields voodoo magic to manipulate minerals and metals. Unlike the gentle nature of her original counterpart, this Annette starts off as an unapologetic and short-tempered girl, shaped by a childhood marked by slavery and the loss of her mother. Throughout the series, she embarks on a journey of healing, learning to confront her trauma and rebuild her trust in others. Even Annette's design is absolutely amazing. And this is coming from someone who has been currently hyperfixated on Mel Medarda from Arcane, and we can kind of see like a similar scheme here. Dark-skinned baddies with gold jewelry, accents, and just overall just big, beautiful eyes. I'm obsessed, as you can clearly see. Black Queens Forever, Snow Bunny. Okay, I'm kidding.
Black Queens Forever, Snow Bunnies Never.
I'm kidding. It's easy to see how well handled Annette's character and storyline are. In fact, 3 Black writers on the team worked closely with executive producer Clive Bradley to ensure that Annette was a character created both by and for the people. In a Gizmodo interview, the Castlevania Nocturne team discussed the series' return for its 2nd season on Netflix. The show has sparked online discussions ranging from video game references and stunning action sequences to fans gushing over Alucard, which is so real and relatable, because who doesn't want a 300-year-old vampire daddy? However, with the new season comes a resurgence of pearl-clutching and Gamergate-adjacent rhetoric aimed at its Black representation, something that should instead be celebrated in the Powerhouse animation series. To address and preempt criticisms from those who deride the inclusion of Black characters in the video game series and deem them as woke, Gizmodo spoke with Black Castlevania Nocturne writers Testament and Zodwa Inyoni, as well as Temi O, along with executive producer Clive Bradley. Together, they explained how they enriched Konami's fantastical source material by weaving in real-world events and the Black experience. I am basically going to be reading this interview out loud for you guys. It was very interesting, and I think it's going to provide a lot of insight into the inspirations and the difference between having Black people write Black characters and then having inexperienced writers. Castlevania is a series rich with fully realized characters, especially when it comes to its Black characters. We've seen this in the past with characters like Isaac, and now we're witnessing it again with Annette, Edward, and Jolta. While fans have come to expect Eurocentric historical events, like the French Revolution, to coincide with a fantastical story like Nocturne's, the show surprised folks the world over by focusing on Black revolutions as well. What inspired the idea of adding that element to Nocturne's story? Then, Clive Bradley says, once we had the setting of the French Revolution, which came from Rondo of Blood being set in 1792, it was vital, I think, to find some way to include the Haitian Revolution. The most radical thing the French Revolution did was abolish slavery. But the fundamental reason for that was that enslaved people were abolishing it themselves in the French colony of Saint-Domingue, later Haiti. Of course, then you need characters to dramatize this, and having a relationship between one of those characters and the hero of the game, Richter, seemed an obvious choice. Of course, the next step was to build a writer's room with writers who could help flesh this out. I'm so honored to have found Testament, Zodwa, and Temi, who did such a marvelous job. So I had to do a little bit of research on these 3 writers because, when you see something good, you acknowledge it. So I went and read up on Testament. Testament is an acclaimed writer, rapper, and Guinness World Record-breaking human Guinness World Record-breaking human beatboxer, now say that 3 times fast, who is based in West Yorkshire. Testament's work ranges from spoken word poetry to playwriting and composition to essay writing. The Black Brits are just winning. They are winning. He's also worked on BBC Radio 1 Extra, Radio 4, 6 Music, BBC TV. He had a very celebrated hip-hop album, Home Cut, No Freedom Without Sacrifice. As for Temi O, what I've got here for her is that she's a British science fiction author, which makes a lot of sense as to why she would be, called on board to participate in this project. Literally living my dream. And she has a BSc in neuroscience. And then we have Zodwa Inyoni, who is a Zimbabwean-born poet and playwright whose works have been performed at the Leeds Playhouse and the Royal Exchange. So we have Black British excellence up in the room with us for Castlevania Nocturne Season 2. Inyoni says, what I found interesting was that conversation about where the line between fiction and reality is. I'm a history buff. I love politics and research, so I love the idea of leaning in on the work that I already do as an academic or as a writer in theater or screen, but also meeting the world of Castlevania. Myself, Temi, and Testament came on board to realize this vision that allowed us to not only bring ourselves and our cultural backgrounds to it, but also open up the same space for more research. Testament said, what I like about working with Zodwa and Temi is that certain go-to cliches have been used in portrayals of global majority heritage characters, and we wanted this to be real. We've seen those hairstyles a bunch, and they're not historically accurate either. We can be fresh with that and keep it in history. The Haitian Revolution, again, had famous women who were generals, leaders, and warriors like Marie-Jeanne Lamartiniere. I hope I got that right. Victoria Montu, aka Toya, and Suzanne Belair. It's just history. 10 years ago, we weren't talking about it until people went back and gone. Oh yeah, Cecil Fatiman was doing spells in the woods and then going and fighting plantation owners. That's a real, true life story. She wasn't the only woman. A bunch of women were in leadership doing that. So we're just drawing on real things, putting it into our fantasy, and hopefully continuing the tradition of mashing together historical periods, dope animation, and representing it. The interviewer goes, "What was your guiding principle for enriching Nocturne's black characters with mythological elements tied to African culture and real-life events like chattel slavery and the Haitian Revolution?" Inyoni answers saying, "We were fortunate throughout the process to work with a Haitian-American scholar called Cecile Axelian. Much of her work revolved around Francophone studies, so she gave us cultural and historical context. That specificity was significant for us to think about how we accurately represented the Haitian Revolution and found space for creative license. We spent so much time cultivating and finding points of accuracy and even conversing with Netflix about the choice of language, what to label accurately. Those things were important for us in the process." Testament then says the first season was so much about freedom. There's a continual theme about people finding and fighting for freedom in different ways. Thematically, it just made sense. History has always been viewed through a particular lens. Certain characters have fallen by the wayside. Thomas Alexandre Dumas, Alexandre Dumas's father, was this war hero in charge of one of the biggest armies in the French Revolution. There are people like Chevalier St. George who mentored him, but this has been erased from history. It was people like Napoleon who brought back slavery after the French Revolution got rid of it, had beef with Thomas Alexander Dumas, and tried to leave the black guy in prison. I'm half African heritage and half European in my bloodline. I have slave owners on my African side and on my European side, slaves and oppressed. I'm passionate about hearing different sides of the human experience, and that's what great art can do. We can have a platform for different stories, but not just for the sake of it to push the narrative forward. Being historically accurate, you're gonna see some black faces and black stories pop up. So we wanted it to be authentic and not just people put in there for the sake of it. The interviewer asks, were there any elements vital to you for Nocturne to nail in the writer's room regarding black representation? Zioni says, everything felt vital. Being able to go back and have conversations with directors and animators about hair texture, clothing, and cultural research on why certain characters have specific clothing and facial features. We did all of that work because representation felt important to us. When you start thinking about where we jump to in time, there's no way we can land in Haiti suddenly with way more black characters and not do the work and create a series that felt true to research. Then the interviewer asks, there have always been cliches for how black characters are represented in animation, whether it's how their hair isn't quite right or how if a black character is a monster, it's leaning on stereotypes that aren't kosher. What was a collaborative process between the animation team and the writers over how characters should look in the show? Inyoni says, I remember conversing about the evolution of Annette's hair. They drew up different styles, studied the meaning behind getting the hair texture accurate, and then went back and I looked at images. We can't be doing all this contextual research around world building, but not go back and look at what these characters look like. At one point, I was going, the shape of the nose isn't right. You can't do this copy and paste thing of the same physical features, but then just make everybody shades of brown. Just doesn't work. So we sat down and talked a lot about why that mattered. I think what was really great is the team was always open about those conversations and open to understanding. Representation isn't just about whether or not we're using the right language, it's also about what it is we see visually. I really appreciate being included in those kind of conversations because it meant this idea around representation had a through line across the board. I hate it when you watch shows and go, oh, they got that element right, but they completely didn't pay attention to this one thing there. It's also to do with the length of time it takes to create this series. You have more space to have those conversations. It helps to have a receptive team that wants to hear why those things are necessary, as opposed to trying to cut corners. Inyoni, as the writer of Annette's breakout episode in season 1, what was your reaction to the response? When we were talking about which episodes everybody wanted to write, I was always drawn to Annette. I wanted to write an origin episode and think about where she comes from, her family background, and the connection to her spirituality, ancestors, deities, and orishas. It's been lovely seeing places where Annette is embraced and celebrated. People love how badass and complex she is, but also seeing how people discuss Annette in relation to the games and the expectations of black characters, whether or not it's about their visibility or in spaces where they've decided that black folks shouldn't be visible. It's interesting thinking about how people pick at this idea of blackness, visibility, or representation in fictional spaces, and whether or not we're having multiple conversations within this show. We need to be able to go, what's the thing we're saying about fictional stories? What's the thing that we're saying about adaptations? What's the thing that we're saying about blackness and visibility? But sometimes it feels like all this stuff got enmeshed into one and exposed people's prejudice and racial biases. I've always been massively proud of Annette as a character. It felt like such a privilege to write her and see people's reaction to the depiction of voodoo and orishas and loving it. The interviewer then asks, there is a scene in season 2 where Richter and Annette discuss Henry the Last's execution, allyship, the consequences of revolutions, and those who symbolize authority meeting their end, right or wrong. How important was keeping that prescient revolution theme ongoing while having characters converse without talking down to each other? Inyoni replies, when people start revolutions, they are determined to challenge the institutions that no longer serve them. Having characters like Annette as the voice of change, we're doing it on different levels where we can tackle the meaning, purpose, and desire for the Haitian Revolution. Inevitably, we have this dynamic with levels of protagonist and antagonist, whether or not it's in the context of Castlevania or the world we live in. You got to find your people and organize to effect change. We see this at the top of the series when Annette seeks out the Belmonts. You constantly have to find your tribe of people who are also invested in this change that you want to bring about. We can't do it alone. This idea that revolutions and civil rights movements happen and everything is done is not true, because society is a living, breathing thing, constantly organizing. What I really liked about the way we edited season 1 is that sometimes you get this idea that everything's tied up nicely in a bow and you're done. But the fight continues, and I think it'll continue regardless of whether we're in a season 3, 4, or 5. The fight doesn't just begin or end with you. Characters like Annette must return to their ancestors for that internal strength and rich conversation around revolution. In the African context, you're not fighting alone with those alive. You're also doing it with the living dead. Their answers never leave you, and you are part of your strength in the fight. The internet goes on for a little bit more than that, but if you guys want to read the full thing for yourselves, I will link it in the description box below. Overall, Annette's reimagined portrayal in Netflix's Castlevania Nocturne as a black sorceress instead of her original depiction as a white European woman has sparked debates among fans. Critics label the change as unnecessary and linked to a woke agenda, while the show's creators defended the decision, citing narrative context and the themes of slavery and freedom. Annette's storyline in season 1 of Castlevania Nocturne is that of a powerful Afro-Caribbean sorceress descended from orishas, who escaped slavery using her magical abilities. After joining the revolution against slavery, she trains with her mentor, Cecile, and sets out with Edward to find Richter Belmont, who is prophesied to defeat the vampire messiah. Throughout the season, Annette battles vampires and night creatures alike, faces personal losses like Edward's transformation into a night creature, and grapples with her own trauma and mistrust. She confronts her former master, Veblanc, ultimately avenging her mother. Annette struggles with Richter's initial cowardice, but eventually finds common ground with him as they confront their shared past. In the climactic battle at the Abbey, Annette fights fiercely, attempts to destroy the infernal machine creating night creatures, and loses Edward again as he sacrifices himself to help her. She witnesses Maria's injury and Tara's transformation into a vampire, narrowly escaping with Richter and Maria after Alucard's timely arrival. Determined, Annette joins Richter and Alucard to plan their next move against Elizabeth Báthory. Annette's story in season 2 revolves around her seeking guidance from her ancestors, who instruct her to find Sekhmet to defeat Elizabeth. Reuniting with Richter and Alucard, the group follows a trail to Richter's grandfather, Juste, before setting out to Paris. Along the way, Annette and Richter grow closer, sharing playful banter and emotional moments. Their journey is marked by battles with vampires, saving survivors, and uncovering truths about their past and the revolution. In Paris, Annette resists a demonic spirit's pull and helps Richter face his guilt over his past mistakes. At an art exhibit, they locate an Egyptian mummy tied to their mission, but Jolta steals it after a fierce battle. Annette defends Richter against Alucard's frustration and comforts him by sharing her own loss, strengthening their connection. Annette enters the spirit realm to find Sekhmet, guided by her ancestors and her mother's spirit. She battles trials, including a sea monster, and defeats a beast sent by Sekhmet, gaining the goddess's blessing. Returning to her body, she wakes in Richter's arms, deeply moved by his care and vows to stay beside her. After the battle, Annette decides to return home, inviting Richter, her little white boy, to join her back to Saint-Domingue. On the ship, they share a tender and passionate moment, solidifying their bond and their future together canonically. Annette is far more than a token character fulfilling a diversity quota. Her character weaves together elements of real-life Black culture, specifically Caribbean and Nigerian mythical beliefs, layered with storytelling that aligns with Castlevania Nocturne's historical setting. Her backstory as a former slave from Saint-Domingue, who overcame unimaginable strife and ultimately killed her enslaver Vablanc, subverts the common critiques of Black characters in media. Questions like, why do Black stories always have to involve suffering, or why can't Black characters have narratives free from oppression, are valid concerns. However, Annette's setup in Season 1 makes narrative sense and pays off beautifully in Season 2. The incorporation of Haitian voodoo and broader Caribbean and African mythology introduces new dimensions to the fantasy genre. This aligns with the rising popularity of Afrofuturism and African mythology in media, as seen in books like Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, which has recently been announced to be getting adapted into a movie, and Disney's Kizazi Moto, Generation Fire, which despite being an exceptional showcase of African storytelling, deserved more attention. Unlike other instances of race swapping that don't add much depth, Annette's character is reimagined with an original backstory, agency, and compelling themes. She isn't relegated to being a damsel in distress for Richter, but instead is fully realized as a protagonist with her own arc. Critics who argue that she should have been an entirely new character often overlook the liberties Castlevania Nocturne and the original Castlevania series have taken with game lore. Characters like Isaac exemplify this, as his story in the show is vastly superior to that in the games. Similarly, Jolta's character receives significant development in Season 2, giving her depth and motivations. Once a loyal high priestess to Sekhmet, Jolta isn't just a feral, bloodthirsty vampire with pink hair. These changes are consistent with Castlevania's approach to enriching its characters. The involvement of Black writers in crafting Annette's story for Nocturne Season 2 makes a world of difference. Stories told by Black people for Black audiences often resonate more authentically, avoiding the pitfalls that non-Black writers sometimes encounter when attempting to depict Black characters.
You're barely even Asian.
Sorry, I'm not Chinese enough for you. But I've never seen you pound back jerk chicken. Last time I checked, Brody twerks better than you.
Annette's arc in Season 2 is arguably more compelling than Richter's, not to diminish his growth. Richter's internal and external struggles revolve around protecting Annette at all costs. Having lived with the trauma of losing his mother and his obsession with avenging her, Richter shifts his focus to the present, realizing he has a chance to protect the girl that he loves. The writers masterfully portray Richter as a yearning lover, a trope that resonates with many, myself included. Richter's devotion to Annette strikes a balance. He respects her strength and independence, but still worries for her safety, which adds nuance to their dynamic. Season 1 faced criticism from some viewers who claimed Annette was too angry, but this oversimplification ignores the weight of her backstory. Being enslaved is not a trivial experience, and her pain and anger are valid responses to her circumstances. The show doesn't shy away from showcasing her trauma, but it also highlights her resilience, intelligence, and her tenderness. Annette and Richter's relationship progression is a breath of fresh air. In a media landscape oversaturated with toxic and obsessive portrayals of love, their slow but steady journey into a relationship is marked by subtle touches, flushed cheeks, and a shared silent understanding. Alucard's observation of their bond perfectly captures it.
She laughs at your jokes. She debates your ideas. She understands what you have lost. You should tell her. Preferably before you get old.
What are the chances we'll live that long?
Richter's readiness to protect Annette both emotionally and physically solidifies their connection. His unwavering support and willingness to throw hands for her are a testament to his love and admiration. Together, they exemplify a strong, healthy relationship built on mutual respect and care, making them one of the most captivating aspects of Nocturne. In conclusion, Castlevania Nocturne demonstrates how thoughtful and well-executed race swapping can elevate a character's depth, enrich the narrative, and provide meaningful representation. Annette's evolution from her original game counterpart to a complex, powerful, and unapologetically black character in the animated series is a masterclass in representation done right. Her journey, shaped by her personal history and cultural roots, adds a refreshing layer of authenticity to the fantasy genre. Providing that diversity doesn't detract from storytelling, it enhances it. By reimagining Annette as a vital and self-sufficient figure, Nocturne not only honors the essence of her character, but also pushes the boundaries of what representation in fantasy can achieve. If you made it to the end of the video, don't forget to drop a like, a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to stay notified whenever I post hot shit like this again. Love you guys, and thank you so much for watching.